Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Notes from the Aleph. An Aleph is a high point from which all things are visible, and from our vantage point, we'll be looking at tabletop role-playing games, their design, and the theory behind those designs. Around here, our motto is to be fair, build up, and have fun. I'm your host, GriffinVarro, joined by our editor, Theta, our local designer, Norman Rafferty, and our good friend and GM, Lessons Learned. When it comes to tabletop role-playing games, I have 15 years of experience running, playing, and frequently fixing problematic rule sets at the table. Pronouns are he, him, and they, them. Rafferty.
Hello, world. I'm Norman Rafferty, he, him. I work for Sanguine Games, where I've been working as a designer on Urban Jungle, Mirrored Song, and Ironclaw, some furry-themed games for over 20 years now, and today I'm going to discuss stuff that's too weird even for me.
And Lessons.
Yes, I go by Lessons Learned over at YouTube and Lesson Learned 1 over here on Twitch. And I'm also a author of a speculative fiction over at Amazon.com with Knights and Stars. Follow my stuff here. And also on Sundays, I run a game for a few people here of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons in the world of Greyhawk, which has its share of very weird creatures as well.
All right, then. So, you may or may not have guessed it, but it's been nearly half a century since the first publication of Dungeons & Dragons by TSR in 1974. We're getting there. And within that time, we've produced a lot of monsters and antagonists for players to fight against, and inevitably some of them are just outright goofy. Full stop, end sentence, send tweet. Today, we'll look at some of our favorites of those silly, strange, and otherwise forgotten monsters today. And I brought a list.
Hey, wait. I think we need to set one ground rule. Are you ready?
All right, set the ground rule.
No Modron.
No Modron. Dang.
You all have heard of Modrons. You've seen the Tony DiTerlizzi artwork, which is the best interpretation. Fight me. We've got weirder stuff.
Yes.
I'll just roll them. I made a note here that just says, like, literally any extraplanar creature, because they all get retconned every edition as the cosmology is literally reshaped every time. So that's just a blanket statement there. I'll start off with every single one of them.
You can bring those up if you want. But yeah, you're right. A lot of the other extraplanar creatures. I don't know if we're going to talk about templates got basically removed. I mean, maybe they're back because I've been following every D&D 5th edition release. But I was really surprised that like D&D 5 opened with only one template, and it was the Fungus Man template. Like,
oh yeah, they're basically gone, which is a shame.
Which is so good. Like, so only humans and minotaurs turn into skeletons. That's it. No one else turns into a skeleton.
Yeah, I guess so.
Ogre, you could turn an ogre into a skeleton.
Oh, did they change it to ogre? But I remember when D&D 5 launched, it was like there's exactly 2 skeletons and only 2 zombies: human zombie and beholder zombie. Those are the only 2 zombies. There's nothing else turned into a zombie.
Yeah, and like older editions, like they'll have like those couple, the exact same ones even up on the board, but they had the template, so you could apply it as you needed it. Because you could resurrect a bunch of different skeletons, but now you can only raise dead on exactly skeletons and zombies, no less, no more, nothing special.
Well, we'll hate on D&D next time. Today we're talking about
exactly.
Yeah. Well, I have a few.
All right, so what did you start Lessons?
Wolf in cheap clothing.
Ooh, here we go.
Basically, it is according to the latest definition of what it is, which is weird because it was never truly defined in the first place, is a vegetable monster that appears as a tree stump with usually a cuddly prey animal, almost always a rabbit, on top of it. Now, the way it's supposed to go is maybe the player characters want either to kill the rabbit for food, and when they kill it, they go grab it, or they want to charm it or have it as a pet. Either way, they want to get close to the rabbit, and when they do, tentacles spring from the ground and attack the players, and then the trunk opens this big mouth that it wants to eat them.
Right. And I'm gonna add a little bit there because, like a lot of monsters we're gonna run into, the context for it has been lost. So the wolf in sheep's clothing first appeared in Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, which is the S3 module. That's the one where the D&D characters go on board a spaceship. And the wolf in sheep's clothing is a monster that's in the arboretum. There's a garden where the vegapygmies come from. So if vegapygmies on your list, they're also from there, the vegetable people.
And
Vegapygmies
Frogamos as well, yes.
Right, and there is some awesome artwork of the wolf in sheep's clothing because the S series originally came with, this is so adorable. They originally came with these books that had pictures in them. And what you were supposed to, and some of them were in color pictures. And what you were supposed to do is you were supposed to, as the GM, hold up card number 12 and say, look, this is what you see. Do you see the cute little bunny on a stump? There's a cute little bunny on the stump. And the players would go, huh, that looks a little weird. Why is it a rabbit?
Why would you have a card for that?
Yeah. But you're, aha! And then they had another card that removes all the plants and stuff. You can see, the stump had a face on it. It's a monster and it attacks you. Ooh. Which I think might have blown people's minds half a century ago. But,
Maybe.
and I say might because also this is a high-level D&D monster. So some people were already sending me mimic jokes. So by now, we've seen the mimic stalactite piercers, the mimic roof lurker aboves, the mimic floor trappers, the mimic treasure chest mimics. By now, everything is trying to eat our face. I don't know why you thought we would be surprised by Bunny Rabbit. In fact, many people are already probably making Monty Python jokes when they see it.
See, that was actually on my list of things to break up because I don't think the context of it has been lost because the context is that your DM is a jerk. To quote for the lurker above, an original creation for the game's artificial underground environment. This monster was designed as a trap for the unwary player characters. The trappers camouflage as a piece of the floor, engulfing a victim stepping on it. I don't need to say why this has been removed from future editions.
Well, I think they expanded the mimic. Today, if I talk to people, a mimic can be anything, not just the chat. So
right, and before
it could be the
hyper specialize all of them.
Right, so instead of having, you'll still meet trappers and lurker aboves in NetHack. So shout out to the NetHack players. But
That's me,
yeah, it's the idea of, I mean, that really gets into an ugly area in the game, which is the game master is the font of all knowledge. So unlike the wolf in sheep's clothing where I could hold up a card and you might be able to make out it's a monster, but you were going to attack anyway, your player character.
Of course.
The idea of you see a chest. I go to open the chest. It bites you. It was a monster the whole time.
No.
It's that's not really clever in a theater of the mind kind of way. And there's a gazillion monsters like that. I didn't even mention
it's a cheap trick.
I didn't even mention the stun jelly. Do you guys know the stun jelly?
No, tell us about the sun jelly.
The stun jelly is gelatinous cube. Except OP, because it's instead of being a see-through monster you just blunder into, it looks just like a wall, and when it touches you, it stuns you, so you can't cry for help.
So even worse. Wonderful. I love it.
It's so public fun. To be fair, it is higher tier than Gelatinous Cube. Gelatinous Cube is tier level 1 stuff.
But even then, gelatinous cubes are still very rude when it comes down to it. But they are at least interesting and iconic. The wall version just sounds like you're being a jerk. There's a running theme here, I think.
Everything eats you. In general, I have a poor opinion of that. At least Tom Moldvay, who wrote the D&D, he wrote the Ultimate Mimic, which is the protein polymorph. And there's at least an interesting adventure written around the protein polymorph. That is a monster that can imitate any other monster in the game.
Oh.
Emphasis on imitate. It specifically can only imitate extraordinary ability. In fact, I don't think you can do extraordinary abilities. I think you can just do the combat stats, and that's it. So that's the first cue that it's a shapeshifter, because it can be anything. But it has a stupid name. Like really, D&D had this psionics phase where they had like molecular agitation and all these pseudoscience names. And protein polymorph sounds more like a
Gamma World.
A Gamma World monster than it does. Most people would call it a shapeshifter or maybe a protean mass. I mean, maybe we could go with that. That would sound more fantasy. But I mean, at least it's like a monster that imitates other monsters but can't actually, use their powers. That's a little more interesting than lurker above. So was that your suggestion, the lurker above?
Yeah, that was my first offer up, so I'll go ahead and keep passing it around from there.
Well, no, I'm going to out-weird all of you guys. And
Do
also,
it.
a lot of people are going to notice that I'm drawing a lot from the Theme Folio. The Theme Folio was the first major outsourced D&D book. It was from Games Workshop before they went whole into, Warhammer and that kind of stuff.
And they got their license janked.
TSR were jerks. But the Fiend Folio was part of the Fiend file where people would write in and submit monsters. And the magazine D&D also had its own monster submissions, most of which I'll be ignoring. But so the Fiend Folio has a lot of weird ones. And of course, my suggestion today is going to be the Siphal, which I wonder if they upgraded that to the new version of the game. That's the best part, is any of these old monsters, someone has already upgraded them to D&D 3 and D&D 5. So the Siphal monster D&D, I forget, Siphal is actually an acronym, because of course it would be.
Of course.
Here's a kit bash for it, so they can add it to the new version of the game. So the Siphal is actually a they didn't bother to translate an acronym. No, a Siphal is a bunch of bugs, all held together into a humanoid shape.
Okay. That's at least easily descriptive.
Yeah, it can fly. No, my favorite part about it is the reason why it's hilarious is because it's even though it's an official monster and showed up in official D&D materials. So I mean, naturally, like, melee attacks don't work against it because fuck your fighter.
Of course.
And stuff like that. But it's actually taken from Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Really?
There's an episode of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends where a comet lands from space. I'm trying to find it right now. Where a comet lands from space and its atomic energy attacks a beehive and turns the beehive into a humanoid bee monster that goes around attacking. And somebody just took that and submitted that D&D and it turned into a monster.
Didn't even check.
And I have a follow-up to that monster, which with the son of Chaos.
Ooh.
People say Chaos, but it's actually Chaos, which is a reading mass of worms that is an avatar for the demigod Chaos, Chaos. See,
I like. I mean, it's a weird monster, but what makes the Siphal kind of goofy is that if you read like its original origin, like you go back to it, they keep talking about how these bugs have gotten together and formed a rudimentary intelligence, like the Phase 4 movie from the 70s. And they've got some kind of hive collective energy that keeps them collected because it's the same thing that holds everything together in the Spider-Man universe. I mean, like, Chaos made a bunch of worms come attack us. That sounds kind of supernatural and scary. I like that. And they're held together because they're the will of the god of chaos. Weird, but at least it's on message. But this, the other thing I really like about the monsters I'm mentioning today is they're also not high tier monsters. They're like, out of the 10 tiers original D, they're like tier 2, tier 3. So this isn't like a world-ending monster. This is like a low-level
It's just
threat.
weird and it happens.
Yeah. Well, then I have another one. The brain rats.
Ooh, okay. Brain rat.
So,
which actually I think were introduced in 3rd edition, I think it was. And they basically went to, 2nd edition. That's a Spelljammer. That's another source of a lot of weird monsters.
Thank you. All right. Yeah. So what does a brain rat do?
Well, brain rat by itself is just a rat with without a scalp. But when you put them in a pack, right, in a big, they actually get psionic powers and they control people and do other things. Which I'm sure right now, Theta is squirming the camera because they met them in an adventure not so long ago, right? And they're just rats. But now when you put them in a and have those player characters attack other player characters. And it's a thing,
But I like the fact that, like, alone they're not a threat, but together that they can control and collective. That makes it a little more interesting as a monster. Like, for example, the wolf in sheep's clothing. What makes that like also a very weird and silly monster is that we're not fooled. I mean, either we were going to ignore the bunny because it doesn't have any treasure, or we were going to kill it anyway. Just, oh boy, it's not a bunny; it's a bigger monster worth more. Whereas the brain rats like are a real threat. So they're both weird. So I like the brain rats. I'm rating the brain rats higher.
All right,
Griffin, give us a weird ass monster.
Oh, I'll go for weird. I was thinking slowly escalating, but let's go a little faster, I think. So my pick for this is going to be the Digester, in the theme of monsters that are also a threat. So the Digester imagine a raptor, first of all, like in body. You got like long legs, you got like a generic kind of scaly body, and then you have like this weird flat face and a spout on the top of the head that sprays digestive
Oh,
acid. And
yeah.
then once its prey is melted, it slurps it up with like these weird little tendrils on its flat little mouth. And it's freaky because like it's this weird concept. It has this strange power, but it's also a threat. This is 3.5. It's a CR6
in
monster.
fact, yeah, that's also what makes it weird. Is it's a D&D 3 entry when D&D 3 was trying to
Yeah.
get rid of a lot of this silliness.
And it does 8d8 points of acid damage for
It's a
level
threat.
6. It very well could kill you instantly. On
Oh my
top
god!
of that, it has a plus 11 melee attack, so it will hit your guy in armor. And it moves at 60 feet per move, which means you can't run away from it either. Good luck.
There's
If
a
your
whole
DM
bunch.
picked it up, it's over.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of these monsters in like D&D. I mean, like one I don't think qualifies as too weird because it's been used in a lot of pre-materials is the Reamer has,
Mhm.
or Remer has, however you pronounce that, because it's a made-up word, which is the
Yes.
weird centipede that is constantly glowing with heat. And you could see that the D&D
Hemorrhoid.
designers realized they had a problem because like the original 3.0 release, I think is something like 10d6 fire damage. Like if you get within melee range of this creature, you just take 10d6 fire damage.
Oh, you just
Or
burn to
something.
death. Yeah, there's no... You don't get out of that.
It was, I think, safer. It was something ridiculous. It might even be more than 10d6. And they, in later versions, they raised the challenge rating and reduced the damage to something like 7d6, which is still a lot. But like, there's something weird about the Digester being a challenge rating 6 monster, but it has an attack that does 8d6 damage.
Yes.
And is that an AoE or is that like a ranged touch attack?
It is almost certainly a cone. It is a 20-foot cone. Oh no, this is the concentrated scream does 8d8. And the cone version does only 4d8, but it's still a DC 17 reflex save either way.
Right, that's gonna
8d8 would
kill
be to a
your.
single target. So yeah, pointed at the wizard. Wizard's gone.
And it continues that tradition I've been complaining about in D&D, where running away is not an option because everything moves faster than you. Just 60 feet, sure, why not?
Oh, you know what the funny thing is? This is also incredibly rude because if you did have the power to bring back your wizard who just got melted, guess what? The resurrection spell won't work because the body is too mutilated. You lost them completely.
Well, it depends on the level of rezzing, but yes.
It depends, but if you're CR6, you don't get it.
And it's also like what makes this also weird is like what fantasy niche does this fill? It's like it's called the Digester.
Yes.
It barfs on people, so I guess it's from some Terry Gilliam. I mean, like what's it for? Except for killing the players. That's another thing I want to bring up with all these weird monsters is that a lot of them serve like no are they're usually like yours is I hate our player characters, let's just kill them.
Yes. So
I mean, this monster runs in the room
theory.
and sprays you with acid. We flee. It chases one of you down and hits you for more damage.
So I do have an abstract theory for at least some of these to explain them, right? Because some writer somewhere went, all right, I have an adventure, I want a unique monster, I make it, and then because it's part of the published material, it gets put into the compendium, which is the collection where everything is. And then once that material's in like pushed to the next edition, they just kind of don't bring the monster with it and kind of goes away forever. And that explains some of them, but like you said, this digester, who came up with it? Where did it come from? Who used it? Is this in any published material?
Well, as I'm
I
fond
don't
of
think it
saying,
is.
who used it? A GM used it exactly once because no one showed up to the game.
Very true.
Oh my god, I forgot. Yeah, I forgot the absurd numbers these have because like speaking of like related to this, like when I was running D&D 3rd edition, I would often try to come up with a scenario and try to find a monster that fit it. Like for example, I wanted to have the players go through a swamp and have a threat, and I used the phantom fungus for that, which is a plant monster that turns invisible. And while that's kind of a weird monster, if there was like the evil swamp and a bunch of people told you don't go in the evil swamp or you'll die. And then you went in the evil swamp and got attacked by invisible plant monsters. That's not weird. I mean, no, we're not that weird.
You've literally described the session of mine like from 4 weeks ago.
Right.
Don't go to the evil swamp.
Right. And also, so the phantom fungus by itself is just kind of, weird. But like we'd have to come up with some scenario like where and if people say, oh yeah, it's a plant that we can't really see and attacks us by strangling us, so it's a threat and kind of weird, kind of. We can also see where people don't go in here. I mean, right?
Yes.
But whereas the digester, you'd have to come up with some reason to explain why it barfs on people, and melts. Like the pictures that people are posting when you look this thing up, it's kind of like it just looks like something from, either the Dark Crystal, if you want to be charitable.
Right, and like the best I have is that like as inspiration goes, like maybe it comes from like dinosaurs, where there's like the one that like flares out and like spits acid. Jurassic Park has like a couple of them.
Yeah,
but it's unlikely that like it goes anywhere with that because there's already dinosaurs in the game. Why don't you use a dinosaur?
So okay, well, I guess I'm going to bring up another pointless monster.
Do it.
Because I like to bring this up. So I'm going to bring up the Osquip. The Osquip. Now, because obviously your game doesn't have enough giant rats in it.
This is true. Very lacking in it.
And I'm Googling for it right now. It's hilarious as no two artists draw this thing the same way.
Okay.
So the Osquip originally shows up in B1. Like a lot of people were wondering, like when they went to go buy original D&D, they had all the modules were lettered and numbered like S1 or C1, but it was always B2, keep on the borderlands everyone had in their box. And so you might be asking, why is it B2? Where's B1? And the reason why is because B1 is the infamous Silver Princess adventure that was banned because it's bizarre and not for children.
Ooh. Is this the one that becomes like the Lamentations of the Flame Princess later on, or is that a different one?
Yeah, you can pretty much draw a line in there. It's got a weird BDSM sequence where the princess is tied up, and also has like a picture that has caricatures of some people who work at the business.
Okay, now I'm interested.
Which is kind of a lame joke. Like it's 1978. I have no idea who who manages your typing pool. I'm a 13-year-old who wants to, play make believe. I don't need this. It's not funny or weird to me. But the Osquip is just a random monster that goes. It's basically a kind of skull-faced mole rat with 6 legs. And the reason why I'm bringing this up as a weird monster is they keep bringing it back.
Like, yeah, that's a weird choice, isn't it? What makes it interesting?
It's deep in the Forgotten Realms lore. They keep updating it for different editions. It had a 3rd edition incarnation, and I think it's got a 5th edition. Although this might be fan created, I'm not sure. Yeah, they keep
possibly
they keep bringing it back, and it's like, who cares? It's just a rat. It doesn't have any weird. It's got 6 legs and hairless. It's like I might go ew, but I'm just gonna kill it. It's like what purpose does it serve in the ecosystem where we already have like spiders and rats and snakes and all that kind of stuff? It's just this weird monster that is tied to an adventure that is notable for being really weird. Like that was the other reason why they got rid of it, because like keep on the borderlands, you fight goblins, you fight kobolds, there's a Medusa in one part of it, the spiders, gelatinous cubes. It was a good introduction to D&D because the good classic monsters, like fighting bugbears is something that makes sense to us. And then there's a couple weird monsters in there, like a gelatinous cube, or a centipede, gets you in the mood. It feels like a fantasy. It feels like an introduction to what D&D is about. You get Silver Princess, we're fighting 6-legged rat people and illusions of women tied up in Shirabari. It's like
okay.
An Osquip.
Yeah.
But I would definitely say like there's a whole category of monsters that are like natural animals, but a little weirder. Like you say, like they have the 6 legs or the skull. One example,
lame in Avatar: The Last Airbender, and it's lame here too.
At least they played for a joke in Avatar and don't take it seriously.
At least not all of them are trying to kill you.
Yeah.
All right. So
I
I
do
think
have
that
a
was
weird one.
yours.
Yeah,
What do you
I
got,
have a weird one,
Lessons?
which I remember because I do have a copy still here somewhere. The Celtic Book of Adventures for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Second Edition. And if I'm
Ooh,
pronouncing this correctly, I typed it up
you
in the
on.
list. The Fachan, I think it is.
Good
It's
attempt.
it's Fachan, and it's a one-legged monster. So basically, it's a one-legged torso, one-armed creature with a weapon that somehow it's super strong, can leap on the one leg, has one eye as well, and either has an axe or a cat of nine tails. And in fact, it's very strong. In the original, for people who know the stats for Advanced and Dragons, it has strength 1850. So it has some pretty good strength. And this thing will jump in from or something like that to attack you. But imagine literally a one leg, one torso, one eye creature.
Well, it's like when you lose senses and one of them grows stronger. If you lose a limb, your other limb becomes stronger, right?
Well,
but this I think was supposed to be an adaptation of a Celtic creature, Celtic monster.
Well, the generic, malformed giants show up a lot. If you're telling if you're going to tell a monster story, you want to tell a monster, I guess a human but less is very popular. Like skeletons are great monsters. And I don't know about the Sashan, but it's probably related to basically the Formor, the Formorian giants, which when they show up in Warhammer, they look kind of like Muppets. I guess they're little like SWAT shaped pointy faced guys. The Famir, is that what they are in Warhammer? Right. But the Fomorians also show up eventually in D&D, and they're basically horrible misshapen giants where they might only have one eye, or they might have that. And there's a lot of folklore about like you've described it. There's the one-footed leaping monsters in Japan folklore, the umbrellas. Like every now and then someone plays an NES game and there's an umbrella with one foot and they go, that's so weird. And in Japan they just go, well, it's a monster. Or the Blemish was coming up recently. You guys ever heard of that?
No, what is this?
So the Blemish goes back to Pliny's myth time. It's basically headless people where their face is in their chest instead.
Oh yeah, I think I've seen like some Chinese folklore versions of that where they got like the chest face and they're just cool barbarians, I guess.
Well, they're not from here, so obviously they're terrible because here is great.
Yeah, sure.
But either xenophobia. And of course, like no one I think bats an eye at Ettins, which let's face it are weird. A two-headed giant, like it's not enough it's a giant, it's also got two heads.
Yup.
So there's a tradition of weird giants of one arm, or cyclopses which only have one eye, or Ettins that have two heads. So it's weird that they picked that one. It was kind of like, hey, I'm gonna show all you guys my Celtic lore here. I'm gonna pick out this weird monster no one's heard of. Wow. So is it my turn to pick a monster?
I think it was Lessons. So
okay. I would like to pick out the biggest screw you monster that I have a lot of stories about. And that, of course, let's get the jokes out of the way. That, of course, is the Nilbog.
What is this?
Official monster was published in D&D. Okay, so the Nilbog is a goblin spelled backwards. They're very clever.
Now I remember. They're blue too, aren't they?
No, they look like goblins in every single way. They're one of those categories of this looks exactly like, it's like the ghouls and the gas, where the gas look like the ghouls in every single way except the gas is paralyzed. Actually, I think ghouls paralyzed too. Gas of the stench, that's right. Moving on. So the Nilbog looks exactly like a goblin, except for reasons never explained. And by the way, it explains it by not explaining, because the folklore says due to some weird magical happenstance, Nilbogs are healed by damage, and they're only hurt by healing spells.
Weird.
Other than that, they're identical to goblins. Now, first of all, kudos on the person for making it a goblin. So it's just like one, like the least threatening monster, or one of the least threatening monsters in the game. But the reason why I mention this is because D&D every now and then tried to make mass battle systems.
Mhm.
Yes.
Battle system. They had a tournament, open tournament. Anybody who wanted to could show up, and you could bring a bunch of monsters that you bought out of the books because their point system was how many experience points it took to kill the monster.
And of course, these were worth basically nothing, and everyone stacked for as much damage as possible, right?
Hi,
Yeah.
I'm Norman Rafferty. This is my army of Nilbogs. There's no mass damage.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, there's no mass damage healing spell. So the like, even if you had enough healers and could deal with them, you can't, like blow them up or kill them because they're invulnerable to damage. Among other monsters I had in my lineup, that was one of them. I think they have disappeared from the game because they are stupid.
Right. It's a trick thing that exists to try to trick people once, and after one edition, everyone's kind of wise to it, really.
I think they needed to
It might be wise after you did it.
I'm a little yeah, they were easier to defeat with other means because they have the same, you can just banish them. Plus you can instantly kill them with death spells. Like, they're not immune to stuff like cloud kill and stuff.
Yeah.
They just don't take damage.
Oh
So
my
they
gosh,
were
chemical
eventually
warfare. D&D.
defeated, but
Ugh.
it was a awesome, confusing thing. And let's see. Oh yes, I forgot. The condition they have is called Nilbogism, and of course, someone has made a web page
Entirely dedicated to them. Does the web page take damage from healing, or
No, this version of the Nilbog is just sorry, they came back in Volo's guide. They just have a charm of.
So I think related to goblins. So I mentioned there were blue goblins, and I did a quick search and found them, and they are just called blue. They are goblins. They are subrace of goblins, but they are blue and psionic, and that's it. I'm just like, okay, why did this need to exist? Why couldn't they just be goblins? Yeah, they're just blue. That's it.
Okay.
It's goblin, but they're blue. But speaking of blue goblins, I actually have one that I wrote down as it's probably going to be forgotten and no one will ever come back to it. Xvarts. Which may as well just be blue goblins. So, I went to look to see what they were.
Oh, I know what. Well, I think it's pronounced Zvart.
Zvart.
Yeah.
There you go.
And they are an alternate spelling of Zvartneblin, which is a
brand of gnome, and they've been taken to the Underdark or shadow creatures and
Right.
transformed like every other evil creature because let's just ape Tolkien some more.
I would hazard, I think the only reason why they exist is because the Theme Folio wanted an entry for the letter X.
Yeah. Almost certainly. But they do show up in Baldur's Gate once, and I'm just like, oh, what are these weird blue things? They're just tiny monsters or whatever. But looking at them now, I'm just like, these are goblins. Why did you make another goblin?
Yeah.
There's no reason for them to exist at all. They don't do anything special. They're exactly the same. They're exactly as intelligent. They have the same mass swarm tactics. They're just dumb, hateful little creatures, and that's all they are.
Blue instead of green.
They're blue goblins.
Can I tip my hand and be lame for a moment?
Oh, please. I had my turn being lame. It's your turn.
Did you? I don't know if you've noticed this, but we're publishing Vital Hearts pretty soon.
Oh boy.
We made the Spart is in it. It's a top tier monster.
Got an upgrade, huh?
Wonderful. At least maybe they'll get some respect then.
There's because it's Vital Hearts is about an MMO filled with monsters, and there's a lot of allusions to role playing games, especially computer games like Wizardry and Black Onyx and the rest of those. And so we put those in specifically because a game designer would sit down and like, it's fascinating to me. Tower of Draga has all these monsters in it that are taken from D&D because they thought the art was cool. But then they started to make an anime out of Tower of Draga. So they started like going back to the video game and copying the monsters that are in there. And so in other words, they're totally removed from context. So the Roper, which is a monster that I don't think is that silly. It's a D&D monster that grabs you and drags you and then eats you. It's kind of a cave monster, but it's a mid to top tier monster in D&D because it stuns you when it grabs you, and like it's very annoying in video games and that kind of stuff. But because it shows up on like level 1 of the Tower of Draga video game, the movies have made them comic relief.
I'll have returning to the theme of monsters that were designed to annoy you, and actually a lot of these monsters actually attack from surprise as well. It's the Executioner's Hood, which in a way it's a smaller. Talked earlier.
I love this monster.
Yeah, but it's just attacks your head. And the thing about it is, and just like Griffin talked earlier, it's one of these types of monsters. Usually, you would die not because of because every other player tried to save you, and they would beat the living crap out of you, but they were trying to.
Oh my god!
And to clarify,
I see the mechanic come up all the time. It's just
you didn't describe what it looked like.
It looks I think I have the picture here.
It's just a bag, isn't it?
It looks like an executioner's hood. It's a black hood. It's a black hood, except instead of eye holes, those are actual eyes, and it drops on your head, and it starts to strangle you. And like you're running around strangling, and of course there's all these rules for players trying to hit it, but they hit you instead.
Now, here's a funny thing: isn't this just a cloaker?
It's
a piece of something that you wear, and it starts attacking you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of in the face. What are they called? Face catchers. There's that monster in Warhammer 40K. The Gene Stealers, but also from the Gene Stealers, there's a monster that looks like a terry cloth towel, but it's actually part of the monsters when you pick it up and eat your face. Yeah, but it's on the Executioner's Hood. It lurks on the ceiling and it drops on you. And I think what makes it a funny, weird monster is, look, it could just be an evil hood. Like if I told you the story of there was once a man who was in the town, he was executioner, he was so evil, and all the townspeople hated him, and he was constantly looking for victims. And after he died, his hood became evil and looks for new victims to kill to this day. That would be a fantasy story. And if the hood attacked someone and got on them, it would be a whole Nightmare at Freddy's moment. And that would be cool. But
no, it would be interesting at least a little bit.
But no, this is D&D, so no, it has to be a monster that is specifically evolved to look like a hood, look black. It's put its eyes where eye holes would normally be, and it's got a bunch of teeth on it. Because it has to be some kind of organic monster that evolved solely for killing people who walk into houses. That one is from Linda Kafka's adventure. I think The Secret of Bone Isle. I can't believe I know that. That's also where potion miscibility comes from, which was the ability to mix potions together and make new ones.
Oh, that actually sounds kind of interesting.
Well, it's a way to break the game
because
you mix potions together until you get one that randomly works forever or something stupid like that.
Yeah. Yep, got to casually break the game.
Also, those were the rules that if you drank more than one potion, you could end up exploding yourself. I think that was also the similar rules.
Potion miscibility was your supposed to mix it. Yeah, it's probably also it's D&D. We have to kill you. Anything you want to do, kill you. Anything you want to do kills you with a 1% chance it breaks the game. Game design.
Yeah.
Okay, how far is it? Well, I can't believe we got this far. So should I drop my bomb here because it's the monster no one's talked about?
Sure. Drop a bomb. Let's do it.
Okay. So no one has brought up my favorite stupid monster from D&D, the Tirafeg.
The
Tirafeg. Those are current rules. I love it. The Tirafeg is a featureless humanoid that has two arms that bend backwards, but don't have hands on the end of them. They instead have spikes. It also has 3 legs, but only one leg has a foot. The other 2 legs end in useless stumps. It then has 3 heads, 2 of which are completely featureless, and the third which only has eyes, as its mouth is in the middle of its stomach. And also above its mouth are tendrils that writhe constantly, the function of which is unknown. That is the description of the original Tirafeg.
This is just a random mishmash of nothing.
Yeah.
I suggest it's probably somebody's nightmare dream. No, but what also I love about it is it's a low tier monster. It attacks with its 2 little dagger arms for 1d4, 1d4, so it attacks for pathetic damage. And it has 2 superpowers. One of which is it can cause a blinding flash that blinds you for only 1 round. But when at the same time it creates duplicates of itself, not mirror images, but illusions that attack you until you disbelieve them.
Wow, yeah, and given older edition rules on illusion, that's rude.
It's rude, but remember, once again, it's a low tier monster and only attacks for 1d4, 1d4, so it's not that dangerous. It's
Right,
annoying.
this is unlikely to kill anyone except maybe your wizard who got into melee, but it's bothersome.
And it has the second power that I love mentioning, which is it can do the flash a second time to blind you for 1 round, but then it just runs away. So basically, it's this weird ass monster that shows up, does a flash, creates illusionary duplicates, you fight those, creates another flash, and then it's gone. And you, of course, like, depending on your GM, get no experience points because you didn't kill it. So
and everyone is just left wondering what just happened.
Makes no sense. You know, totally edgelord, does a minor amount of damage, and then disappears. No explanation. No one knows where they came from. No one knows why they look like this. They're not even that dangerous. It's my favorite of all the classic D&D monsters because it's like, why? What? Where did this come from?
I would ask, how do you fit this into a story or a campaign? And the answer is you just don't. You just throw it in because it's weird and sudden, and then it's gone.
So I mean, I'm sure some people, you know, if you were doing Planescape or Spelljammer and you wanted to have a weird monster in the middle of nowhere, you might throw one of these in there. It's also in that category of, like I said, monsters that we've stopped caring. After we fought like the Osquip and your Executioner's Hood and your Zvort and your Digester, you know, we stopped trying to ask any question. All we care about is killing things. Because that's my big thesis point about all of this is like, my weirdness jar is full. Like, after you filled up my weirdness jar, I've stopped caring and now I'm not involved. I think that's why it was great to express, like, the Executioner's Hood could be a monster with context. And I've heard some people say a good GM can give these things context. But when we're talking about these monsters, they're just presented with none. Like you just said, the Zvort, it's an evil blue humanoid corrupted by magic, which is totally like all these other ones that are corrupted by magic. Because there's a bunch of those. There's Quicklings, there's Germlanes, there's more than one of these already. You know, like what does this add to the story? What's the background? Like, why isn't this like a dark creeper, which has a backstory?
Right. And I think to like mix things together, I got something that's weird and annoying at the same time again. So let's see if I can live up to the previous entry here. So what I have to present is the Ethereal Filter. And let me describe what it looks like to the best of my abilities. It is a creature with 1 leg. It has 2 heads, one above and one below, 4 arms, and a comma-shaped body. This thing exists to be annoying. It is a, quote, bizarre-looking creature with a penchant for snatching trinkets from passerbys and then disappearing onto the ethereal plane. This is a CR3 creature, obviously because, you know, it doesn't do much damage, it's not a threat. It pops in, steals something from you, and then goes to a place you can never catch it. Because at level 3, you have no recourse. You have to hope it comes back for more.
So that +2 ring protection that you just got, gone.
So, well, in theory, so this is funny because I've used the Ethereal Filter.
Yes.
But I was running an all D&D psionics campaign. So first of all, that was the excuse of weird ass monsters because it's going to be all mind magic. Mm-hmm. And so there was an ethereal, but the trick behind the Ethereal Filter is that people forget is that it has to become material, take something. And it has to become immaterial. And this is Rafferty's going to get it all formalist on you. Turning ethereal is a spell-like ability. Using a spell-like ability provokes an opportunity attack. So if the creature moves up to you and takes something, the mere act of it fleeing to another dimension means if you're next to it, you get to melee it before it goes away.
Right. So you do get a chance to deal with it. It's not
because it's challenge rating 3, a low-level party might be able to take it out before it disappears.
Yeah, it's only 22 hit points here. It's AC 17. It's not that bad in terms of like horrible, annoying jerk things you could do. It's scaled down enough that it's very acceptable in that terms. But like our previous entry, It pops up, it looks weird, and then it disappears.
Yeah, and it can sneak
You
up
have-
on you too, because it's got reasonable sneaking skills too, right?
It definitely does. It has no, actually, it doesn't have stealth. I think it just relies on being on another plane of existence, but it does have plus 12 to sleight of hand. So it will probably succeed to take what it wants from you.
Right. I mean, it will get into melee with you, pick your pockets, and then leave. And of course, that is always a jerk move of something that steals something from you and then leaves. People hate those. Like, I play computer games. Anytime anything that shows up and steals, it's like you hate those more than the monsters actually kill you.
Oh yeah, and when it comes to that, like in computer games, like if something runs away with your stuff, it's just gone forever. It's just been deleted. In a tabletop RPG, you can usually assume your stuff is still around. You can hunt it down if you want, but not if this guy takes it.
Yeah, well, he's another place that exists.
It may as well be deleted now. He's going home and he's going to enjoy your object more than you did.
It's a dual whammy from D&D, which is it's bizarre for the sake of being bizarre, and it's a huge fuck you to the player.
It sure is.
Now, this creature that I'm going to call it's.
Ooh, go ahead.
It's not weird or dangerous in the sense that it clearly somebody who came with this creature loved lions. So it's a Wemic or Wemic. Essentially, it's a centaur. Its lower part of its body, it's a lion. Yeah. It's supposed to be a humanoid, but then its face, it's also a lion. So it's like you like lions and you like people. Well, I'm going to put lions on your people. I'm going to put people on your lions. That's a Wemic for you. Right?
Yeah, and the Wemic is a little weird because it eventually shows up in the Hero Quest computer games as one of the things that you can fight. And you start to think that maybe with its name, like maybe it's like a manticore or oh god, what is that thing that's half? There's a creature that's half ant, half lion. Oh, it's got a weird name. There's a whole bunch of these like half, griffin and centaur.
Yeah, a lot of wizard-dated species.
Well, but also like they're from Greek folklore, from Persian folklore.
Some of them are anyway. But
right.
Yeah.
So you might think the Wemic, with the way its name sounds a little unusual, it might be like this half, lion with a lion face and lion body might actually be a thing, but no, it's totally from the game. And they liked it so much they put it in the Hero Quest game. So not well, actually they don't call them Hero Quest. What do they call it? It was renamed.
It should be Hero Quest still, right?
Okay, well, Hero Quest. Yeah, it's in the Hero Quest. So you want to be a hero, that kind of stuff. It's one of the weird monsters because they also have other cat people.
Yeah.
So I guess they decided they would have those. So yeah, you're totally right.
More cats. Well, we gotta have more cats for the giant rats, right? They keep showing up.
I'm Googling for it right now, and they keep saying like creatures in folklore, Wemic, and it always says from Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm just gonna shake. Dungeons and Dragons is not folklore, and then you're gonna point out it's half a century old. Still doesn't count. That's not folklore. That's nerd lore. There's a difference.
Yeah. You gotta at least give it a century or two, maybe.
Yeah, I'm gonna be old, sad.
It could be folklore if you get like a society of nerds together. It just doesn't last.
It jumped to the computer game, so yeah. Like I'm looking at stuff like Lamazu, which is human head, bull's body, eagle's wings, which you see a lot on Babylonian myth. But no, Wemic. It's just somebody thought they were really cool, and isn't there like a lion tour enemy in Zelda? It just came back in Breath of the Wild.
Lionel, yes, and it appeared like even in some of the earliest entries, it's just like this weird little creature coming around.
It's got like two swords.
I think they made it actually really cool looking in like Breath of the Wild and stuff. They like really took the concept and made it really, really awesome.
Oh yeah,
I don't know what its purpose is, but like they just exist and go around, and they're really strong.
Yeah, they do pretty good work there. Well, also you can be a little more forgiving. Like when something gets adapted for the computer game, they hire a real art director, and they also try to have a harmonious theme to it. Like some of the monsters, like I'm more forgiving of mimics in Dark Souls than I am in random games, because in Dark Souls there's a trick to spotting them. They look slightly different than regular treasure chests. Plus, they also have a clever move where instead of making it kind of a protean blob mass that changes shape,
it's a grapple maneuver.
Well, it's got its hands and legs tucked inside its body, so it kind of steps out, and it looks absurd, which also adds to the grotesque nature of it. So, and you usually find it in either like trap areas, like Sen's Fortress, it's full of traps, or weird areas like the Chaos Ulasil or Aldrin's Keep, which are just like places where it's already weird here. You should know better.
Yeah. So let's see. Lessons, you got like another folklore-ish monster, because I got one and I want to follow it up.
All right.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and do one. So everyone knows what the Medusa is, right? You know, classic folklore monster. Yes, the Medusa is great. But it's D&D, so you don't just have one Medusa, you have a species of them. And suddenly you have to go, so what do the guys look like? And that's where the Maidar comes in. The male version of Medusa.
Hairless men?
Yeah. Hairless, featureless gray men, which go around, break statues, and then pick up the statue bits and turn them back into flesh to eat. They're completely pointless. And probably never been used by anyone.
Well, they're not that pointless.
But it's an attempt to back explain something that they changed to make it a whole species.
Oh my god, it's even better. I owned the magazine where they debuted. And so there used to be a long-running feature in Dragon Magazine of the ecology, where they wanted to explain like what role the displacer beasts hold in the vast ecosystem.
And to be fair, I appreciate those texts. They're good. They give ideas.
No, they are pointless and stupid.
They are also that.
Because it was like like if the world was actually, they're usually big, long, space-filling travelogues and stuff that doesn't really apply to you.
Of course.
And the reason why those Medusa guys exist, was it Modrians?
Maidar.
What?
Maedar.
Maeder. Made up word, Maidar.
Maidar.
Was because the guy was writing up the ecology of the Medusa article, because he had in the editorial notes for it. He was writing up the editorial on the ecology of the Medusa, and he was having trouble trying to figure out what role a woman who turns people to stone would have in a planetary ecosystem. Never mind that the actual creature is a Gorgon who is cursed by the gods, or born that way because they're just born a monster. Medusa is a human turned into a Gorgon. But Gorgon's a different creature in D&D.
Exactly,
So you can't use that word either.
But so he said, well, obviously if turned to stone, there obviously would have to be some like role. So he made up the Maidar, which are the male of the species, which of course can turn people back, because he thought there needed to be some sort of ecological balance going.
But it can be extremely jerk monster, because hey, you got turned into stone, but there's magic that can turn you back into flesh and save you. Not even Maidar shows up.
Right, yeah, like if you have a Medusa, at the very least, like, even though like Medusa would be portrayed as like a spiteful, evil monster, their usual next action isn't to go and break your skull first now that you're a statue. The Maidar specifically is, I'm going to coup de grace the now helpless, officially semi-dead character.
And if also you thought, well, all we have to do is after we kill the Medusas, get the Maidar, you forgot to mention the other Maidar's other power.
Oh, what is it?
It has pass through stone at will. So,
and you'll never catch it.
It means it can just flee through the walls. Every time it's pictured, it basically hangs out inside the wall and misses the entire fight. And then after everyone's turned to stone, then it comes out. Which means you might never even encounter it.
So even if you want to feature it, it doesn't show up. It's so stupid. It's so pointless.
It is one of those hilarious monsters that is like, really, I think it's the apogee of overthinking. Because I think it's glorious that it exists, and then I can't believe I know the lore about it. It's that kind of thing where also it's a thing I'm talking about where like people will say, well, it's part of the important backstory of the world. But I always want to talk about the player-centric role. Like the problem with the Madar is if we're just gaming a game, like we're just here to kill monsters and have fun, we don't care about the Madar. It's just more experience points if we manage to kill it.
Right.
Or it screws our friends over if we don't. And if this is part of a larger world with a larger lore, it's like we have to explain that no, the Medusa and the Madar have this long lore and history. We don't care about that because it doesn't affect us in any way. They don't have any political role in society. Even if we knew the monsters were there, the Madar is not a threat. It turns stone into flesh and then eats us. So by itself, we don't bring any special weapons for it. And if we knew there was Medusa there, we already brought a mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So, like none of this like really adds to the lore. And it's so specific. Like we would have to come up with a whole bunch of huge paragraphs to wedge this in. And in the end, it doesn't really add that much. And that's what I love about it in terms of like silliness. It's that mentality of D&D.
And you know what? It actually takes away, because like the reason you add a Medusa in is because it's a very familiar thing to people. People understand the mythology of it. They at least have the barest idea of what its purpose is and how it works. And then this thing comes in and it's pointless now. None of that is real.
It's silly fanfic. I mean, they even changed the Medusa so they shoot. Because Clash of the Titans came out as a movie and it had a Medusa that was half snake and used a bow. All Medusa now are half snake and use a bow. They weren't before this. They are now.
What was Medusa's job before she transformed? I think she was just like some pretty girl around town, wasn't she? No, like no actual job.
Zeus, I think it was either Zeus or Poseidon wanted to have sex with her. She said no. Also, she was vain. She was bragging about how pretty she was. That's right. She was bragging about how pretty she was. So Hera turned into a Gorgon. And then
she didn't have like a job or a designated skill prior to. She doesn't officially have anything she does. Or Agnia at least like is a seamstress. So
in the original myth, literally Perseus sneaks up on her while she's asleep, cuts her head off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's just careful.
Just minding her own business. Cursed individual, ruined because she didn't want to have sex by Zeus, and then just murdered in her sleep.
Yeah,
I think she was also in some versions. She was a priestess of Athena as well.
Yeah, I think there's like a couple different versions and definitely a couple interpretations to take.
Yeah, and then out of her blood springs
snakes.
Yeah. No, the Bellerophon, the Pegasus. The Pegasus comes out of her blood.
Oh, wait, really?
It's
okay.
really goofy. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So, not the monsters you see. Once again, people see we're calling the movie instead. All right, well, I guess we're almost out of time, so I guess I need to bring up the worst monster D&D has ever had.
All right, last one on the list. What does it get? The worst one ever.
The worst monster that's ever appeared in D&D. Worse than the one you're thinking of. Worse than the one you're putting in the comments. The worst monster D&D has ever had is the Pseudo Undead.
Yes.
Pseudo Undead are from first edition. Gary Gygax claimed, once again that he was full of ideas, so it's a Gary Gygax invention. Pseudo Undead are humanoids that look identical to undead, except they're actually alive. So, like, it would be a skeleton, but it's not a human. But all their organs are transparent, so they look like skeletons. Or a zombie is just a really dirty human, or a ghoul is just a really dirty human.
Yeah.
Or a vampire is just an Eastern European. I guess we just murdered an Eastern European in it, right? They only exist because if you try to use your action to turn them or use spells that only work on the undead, they fail because they're not actually undead. However, everything normal works on them just fine.
Very, very tangentially, very closely, the idea lives on in the bone golem, which similarly exists to trick you into thinking it's undead, only for it to not work.
Well, the bone golem I can let go because there's also flesh.
Yeah,
and I'm assuming that a bone golem is just a flesh golem left out. I mean that. But I mean, like, it'd be a magical construct. Like, you wouldn't be surprised that the bone golem is immune to.
But if it's just some dude.
I mean, right. But I mean, like, the Pseudo Undead existed before there were lore skills in D&D. It literally exists solely for your cleric to waste one turn attempting to turn it, and then it fails. It's the whole shape-shifting stuff, but more bullshit. It's like, oh no, skeletons. I'll try to turn them. It doesn't work. Oh my god, why doesn't it work? They bullshit. No, it turns out they were just skeleton cosplayers.
You killed a bunch of trick-or-treaters.
And of course, they posit that, like, of course, the pseudo undead have to have like their own. Once again, with your Madar, they have to have their own ecosystem of like apparently the society of all skeleton people who all hang out because they're people. They have to eat. They have language skills. They have intelligence. They're not just mindless undead. They're just a bunch of people who look like skeletons. This is their culture. They're skeletons.
I do have one final guy who actually meets and
one more.
When it sees it's the Hound of Ill Omen.
I think I've heard of this briefly.
The Hound. We should probably wrap up with monsters that aren't really monsters. Go ahead and tell us what the Hound of Ill Omen is.
The Hound of Ill Omen is designed essentially to enforce alignment. If your character steps out of alignment, a shadowy spectral wolf will appear and howl. And then the damage your players will take, I think it doubles or even triples until the curse is lifted. Essentially, you become more vulnerable and you're more likely to die unless you...
Right. Now see, I think we're ending on a note here of monsters aren't really monsters, because the Hound of Ill Omen gets a huge monster write-up, but the monster write-up is filled with nonsense of like, can't be hit by any attack. Hit points don't matter because you actually can't attack it, or it's all these different stats that are listed in there of, invulnerable everything. It just appears, howls, and leaves. And as a storytelling device, that's not terrible. Like, if you actually cared about alignment back when people actually did, the fact that a creature would show up and I curse you for not, for misbehaving, you now take double damage from everything. As an intervention from a god, that's actually kind of cool. And it's actually kind of more interesting than just, I got cursed one day and didn't know it. It's like, no, I sent this shadowy creature to appear, howl, and leave. But it was this weird thing of where in D&D it was presented like a monster, like a mobile you would engage, even though you don't actually engage it. And there's a couple monsters like that. Ractus is bringing up in the chat the Ear Seeker.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm so glad I'm not in D&D anymore. They get a huge monster write-up despite the fact that they're like tiny little termites, microscopic in size. But they get this huge write-up of like a monster. Ear Seekers live indoors. And so when you go to put your ear to listen, they jump inside your head, burrow into your brain, and kill you.
Save versus death, lose your character. Oh, fun times.
The only thing they can save you is if someone has a held action to cast cure disease or something stupid or something vaguely defined in D&D.
And who would prepare for that? Yeah.
Well, after your second year. But I mean, like
your second one.
That's just the apogee. We're not even talking about the door shapeshifts into a monster and eats your face. No, the wood in D&D has parasites in it that will burrow into your brain and kill you in a minute. I want to say seconds, but a round in D&D is a minute long, so you actually have a minute to live. But it's also like, there's a bunch of monsters that got moved. Like in D&D 3rd edition, they started taking these things. Well, first of all, it took Ear Seekers out because
it encourages terrible behavior.
I listened to the door, so there's anything behind it. Brain worms. But they moved Yellow Mold, which was a common monster in D&D, into trap category because that's the mold that explodes and kills you with poison. And they moved
into a zombie, which attacks other people, which then
Right, and they can't. Well, right, Yellow Mold zombie, but I mean, they still have Yellow Mold, like a room that you walk in it and mold spores go off. I think Shriekers, depending on which version, did they move Shrieker back to monster category?
I don't know. I remember playing Pathfinder recently, and they were in monster category. I'm not sure where they are in like 5th edition D&D though.
Well, but a Shrieker is a mushroom that when you get near it, it screams, which by itself is not a problem. It's that they automatically lure their alarm. They allure other monsters from other areas.
Yup.
And it's another one of those silly things in D&D of something. There's also, and I think there's also violet fungi, which look just like Shriekers, except they have tendrils and they can rot your flesh.
Yikes! Yeah.
And you can find them in the same areas as Shriekers. They're a bit higher level. So basically, it's like if you just go to ground and wait for something to show up, one of these might be a violet fungus. And of course, our favorite. You guys remember gas spores, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yes.
Oh my God, you guys know it. See, that's where we just know that your GMs hated you because they had gas spores. For those of you playing along at home, the Beholder is one of the signature monsters of D&D. It's a floating eyeball monster. But there's also a gas spore, which is a floating eyeball fungus that if you stab it, will explode.
And so,
it looks
of course,
it looks like a beholder because that's all. Oh my God, beholder! Ah!
It looks like a
so
beholder.
of course your GM decided to put 12 of those alongside his actual beholder just to screw with you.
There's a published adventure that not only has gas spores in it, but they have yellow mold growing on them. So it explodes for damage now and poisons the room later.
I think Baldur's Gate 2 also pulls this exact same move.
Well, yeah, probably because it's copying from this stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, like basically, my summary of all of this is kind of like, D&D. There was even some during the Satanic Panic. I would have to find the article for this, but there was even one preacher who read the book and said, okay, well, obviously D&D is satanic because it has people casting magic, and everyone knows don't suffer a sorcerer to live. Period. But also, you can't help but notice that most of the monsters in this seem to be some sort of contest to make the weirdest creature possible. It's like one of his summaries was that the monsters in D&D aren't really actually satanic; they're just weird.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that from someone who was here to malign D&D, I thought there's a lot of stuff that's in D&D. And of course, like you said, a half century, it's like something that was stupid before that gets rewritten. Like you may have noticed, we went right past Modrons and right past Flumps because I'm tired of talking.
Of course.
We went straight to the stuff that is obviously really weird. What I think is hilarious is it keeps coming back. People missed the Osquip. It had to come back. It was too important.
Gotta have it.
And I'm glad you found the Madar. I can't believe you found that. I thought no one remembered this.
It's my favorite pointless monster, really.
Did someone write this up for modern D&D? I have to. Oh my God, they did.
They probably did.
Oh, they did. But I think this is probably a good enough point to conclude. I think it's fair to say this has definitely been an incredibly fun episode for me. There is so much goofiness. We could be here for another hour. Maybe we will be.
I think we thanks everybody. I think we hit the high points of basically this is the kind of stuff that people tell me like a good GM could make this work, but it's also like a good campaign would be one where it's a science fantasy and makes some sort of sense. And also, if you're gonna have these monsters in, like people say, a good GM can do folklore, but my issue is most of the time when you meet these in the D&D monsters, they didn't put any folklore leading up to them. They don't put in rumor tables anymore. And so there's nothing you're expecting. They don't tell you, don't go to the swamp, it's haunted, or don't go to the old executioner's house. They say he still lives today and will strangle you. Like some sort of clue that this might happen.
Right.
It's like ear seekers were just, I'm tired of players listening to doors all the time. And if I'm not killing a player every session, I'm obviously not.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Take a monster, put it into a dungeon, and just let your players murder it. It looks weird, so kill it.
Yeah. Bring your glass cup and your 10-foot pole, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. And also, I'm glad we touched on this. Like the Reamer houses and digesters. It's also like if you made up a monster that makes no sense and killed all of your players, it's like, who were you trying to impress? Something that made no sense and we never understood came in and killed all of us. That's a horror movie, not a fun fantasy romp.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
So I think for now, that's going to be it for this episode of Notes from the Aleph. We stream episodes bi-weekly Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you can come join us live at Twitch at twitch.tv/Ractus. We also stream and record weekly tabletop games at the same channel, and you can come join us when we start at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sundays and Wednesdays. Norman Rafferty here is a partner and writer for Sanguine Games. Check out sanguinegames.com and join us on the Reddit and Twitter, and look forward to the upcoming Book of Coral's Ironclaw expansion book, where you can have your pirate adventure. Don't forget to check out RedRabbit and book him at startplaying.games at RedRabbit. And Lessons, where can we find you?
You can find me here on the Lessons Under One, streaming every week, hopefully Mondays through Friday, and you can find me over YouTube under Lessons Learned. Also, you can find me Amazon. Night and Stars is my short story collection for 99 cents.
Very good. And of course, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and come see us all again. Till next time, everybody.
Bye.